The federal government also insists that it's ready to assist the affected communities in any way it can. Patty Hajdu is the Minister of Indigenous Services. I spoke to her again just a few minutes ago, actually, not long before our program started. And I do want to remind you that she was not aware and I was not aware yet of this latest emergency alert, which says that the suspect is no longer believed to be on James Smith Cree Nation. So you'll hear my first question relates to something, the earlier development when we thought he was there. But in any event, this interview was taped a little bit earlier. So have a listen to Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu. Hi, Minister Hajdu. Good to have you on our program.
Hello, Vashi.
Unfortunately, under these circumstances, wish it were under different ones. I have a number of questions as they relate to your portfolio of Indigenous services, but I have to start out with what I know our viewers are watching unfold right in front of them, and that is the search for the surviving suspect, the suspect who is still alive. Police have issued an alert to people on James Smith Cree First Nation saying stay inside. What information can you share with our audience about the threat they face right now and if the suspect is there?
So, Vashi, I don't have that information, obviously, but I will say that it's important that members of the James Smith Cree Nation follow the recommendations, the requests of the RCMP. This is, as you know, a live situation. It's very frightening for the community, very, very frightening. And I know that this is it's been an incredibly horrific several days, and we all hope that this will come to an end soon.
And I know you've spoken to the leadership there, and I want to get your take on those conversations in a second. I think a number of Canadians are also really concerned to hear that this individual had 59 criminal convictions. How concerned are you about that?
Well, listen, community safety is at the forefront of what community members talk about in the many communities that I've visited over the last several years. And in fact, the foundation of community safety is necessary in the minds of community members to build upon their communities, to build upon the work for a better and more prosperous future and safer communities for their children and families. So obviously, there is a lot of work to do. There are many important questions to be answered. Right now, my focus is, as the Minister of Indigenous Services, on the kinds of services and supports, the kinds of financial resources that will be needed to respond to the crisis as it evolves and the many families that are affected.
And I do want to know about those services. But again, just on, and I know that you're not the Minister of Justice. I do understand that, but you're the minister that the government said could do an interview tonight. The Minister of Public Safety declined our request to do so. This individual was, released under statutory release and then sent back and that release was suspended because he violated his parole. This is the information we have right now that's out there. And then the parole board suspended that, basically said, overturned the suspension rather. The parole board ensured that he would be set free, obviously following a certain number of conditions. I think, again, a lot of Canadians are perplexed by that and want some more answers. I know that you don't have all the answers, but do you share those concerns? Do you share those questions? Is there a deeper look at the parole board once this is all resolved that your government should be undertaking?
Well, listen, I think those are all extremely important and fair questions. And I think, as I said earlier, it's paramount that communities feel safe. It's paramount that communities feel that they have care and control over the safety of their communities. And I think those questions and the answers that will undoubtedly come from, I'm sure, a variety of formal and informal mechanisms to understand how this happened are going to be critically important. And critically important not just in terms of the system that needs to be reviewed, but critically important in terms of the families themselves and their understanding of how this came to be.
On the issues of community safety and the services your government is prepared to provide or provide a foundation for, I wanted to ask you about First Nations policing. I know that there is work being done on a legislative framework. That's at least my latest understanding. Is it the intention of your government to introduce legislation at some point to make that essential?
So there is co-developed legislation underway, as you know, being worked on with my colleague, Minister Mendicino, and First Nations Indigenous leaders themselves. It is really important that it is co-developed. Many approaches have been imposed on Indigenous people in terms of community safety that have not resulted in safer communities or in consistent community safety and policing approaches. There are a variety of different methods and mechanisms out there right now. And I think that the true transformation of community comes through Indigenous-led solutions. So I am looking forward to this work, and no doubt it will be a priority for not just Minister Mendicino, but for the communities themselves.
On the issue, though, of how much of a priority it is, and I do take your point that obviously shouldn't be imposed, but we have heard from First Nations police chiefs who have talked about this prior to this event. But even in this context, we're hearing from community members who were concerned even about the length of time it took for other police services to respond to the crime scene. When you say that this process is underway, is there any kind of timeline that you can tell our viewers about tonight?
I don't have the specifics on the timeline of when the legislation will be introduced, but I do know that those consultations with First Nations and Indigenous peoples is happening right now. I will also say that there's a ton of work happening on community safety. Of course, enforcement is such an important component, but many community leaders will tell you that it's equally important to focus on community safety. And so crime prevention, community development. I was in Kwanlundun in the Yukon this summer. I was so impressed with their community safety program, which the leaders talked about being the foundation of the healing of their community and indeed the prosperity of their community, which is growing in leaps and bounds. So this is extremely important work. I know that it will be obviously a very big focus for Minister Mendicino as it has, and I am certain that this experience that unfortunately the James Smith Cree Nation is going through will feed into the consultations.
And in your conversations with the leadership there, based on some conversations we've had with people who live there, there is a big concern about addiction and mental health support. I know that is a file that you've worked on. I know that there have been investments over the last number of years, but what have you learned from those conversations about how your government's approach could evolve or should change?
Well, I think there, as I said, there's obviously, yes, I've heard that. And I've heard across the country the need for better, more culturally appropriate mental health and addiction support services. In fact, the way that many Indigenous people conceptualize treatment is through the lens of culture and culture reclamation and healing from the many generations of colonization, including experiences of residential schools. And oftentimes communities talk about back to the land programs and school-based programs, and again, starting much earlier in the journey of wellness, if you will. So we are open to all of those ideas, and I'll be working with the leadership as they start to determine what those medium and long-term goals are. And we have made the commitment. In fact, the Prime Minister was on a call with the 3 community chiefs. We've made the commitment that we will be with James Smith Cree Nation for the long haul as they determine how best to address the ongoing mental health and substance use crisis that many of their members are facing.
Minister Hajdu, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Vashi.